Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. It should last around about 45 minutes. It's one of the sessions that we're running as part of the Banking Excellence webinar series. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And we're looking at bank reconciliation this morning. So running through that process, what does it look like? And some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the bank reconciliation option, but you never know, you might pick up some tips along the way, and others, you may never have touched it before. So hopefully we'll get you started and pointed in the right direction. Now, before we get stuck into the webinar, a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one, it will be muted automatically. You'll find you can't unmute yourself. That means if you've got any questions, you'll need to type them into the questions panel. To access that, you just need to click that little icon, which should be on the taskbar down the right-hand side of your screen. It's the one that looks like the little speech bubble. Give it a click, it'll expand the panel, and you'll have access to that box at the bottom right-hand corner. So any questions or comments, pop them in there. Remember to click send, otherwise we won't see them. And we'll try and get an answer to you. Now, we're joined today by Abby, Jackie and Matt. They'll all be on hand in the background to help answer those questions. So you may get a straightforward answer to your query. It may be a link where there's to maybe one of our help articles where there's more detailed steps. Or if it's a bit more specific to yourself, a bit more detailed, then maybe they'll advise you to get in touch with our support team. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides, they are available to download during the session. They are available, our link is provided on the follow-up email, and there'll also be a link on our recordings page as well. So do try and take the opportunity if you want them to get them during the session. So it is just a copy of today's slides. If you want detailed information, sort of that step-by-step guide, you will find that in our help center. As normal, you will receive an email after the session, so around about an hour after we finish. It will include a recording of today's session. It will include a link to the handout for today's session, and it will also include links so you can register for our other webinars. So if there's other webinars in our Banking Excellence series that you want to attend, watch out for that if you haven't already registered. And there'll also be a link to our recordings page. Now, on the subject of this webinar series that we're currently running for the banking area of Sage, we've already covered sessions 1 and 2. We covered those yesterday, but they will be repeated over the next couple of weeks. Today we're looking at session 3, which is reconciling. I'll guide you through that one. We've got Abby on hand this afternoon. She'll be guiding you through bank feeds. That's at 2 o'clock. Plenty of time to register for that one if you haven't already. And then we've got a number of other sessions as well. Now, we do offer a digital badge for the bank attending the Banking Excellence webinar series. You would need to attend 6 out of the 8, or minimum of 6 of the 8 webinar topics, plus one of the quiz sessions. So we're running each session twice, including the quiz. So if you do attend 6 plus one of the quiz sessions, then you would qualify for that digital badge, and that will be sent out within about 2 weeks of us finishing the webinar series. Right, let's have a look at what we're covering in this morning's session though. So a little bit of background, particularly for those of you that aren't familiar with reconciling, or you may have heard the phrase, but you've never really looked at it as such. So what is a reconciliation? Why would you run one? What are the benefits? We'll run through a series of demonstrations, looking at the settings that you've got available, the actual process of reconciling, what does it look like, but also what happens in the background. So once you have reconciled, what does it do? That will help as well if you ever have an issue. If you have a good understanding about what happens when you reconcile, if you do spot an issue, it can help with your understanding of what options you've got available and maybe why things have gone awry a little bit in the future if you've made a mistake. I'm going to give you an overview of bank feeds in today's session because that feeds in very nicely to the bank reconciliation process. But as I say, Abby will be taking you through that one this afternoon at 2 if you want to sign up for that one. Just at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support. And then if there are any outstanding questions, which we're going to try and pick up throughout the session as well, then we'll hang around and maybe answer as many as we can. Right, okay, let's get started then. So we'll start with little bit of background. Again, some of you will be very familiar with sort of the theory of reconciling, etc. You'll have done it probably a number of times in Sage. Others, you may not have touched it at all. But what is a reconciliation? Well, basically, it's the process of matching your transactions that you've entered in your accounting software, so what you've got entered in Sage Accounts, matching those against those transactions on your bank statement. So essentially, it's almost like a ticking exercise, sort of making sure that your accounts are accurate, as it mentions in the benefits there. So it means that everything that appears on your bank statement, you've then got entered in Sage. You're ticking them off to make sure the two sort of tally up. Obviously, benefits-wise, obviously it means your accounts are accurate because everything that's on your bank statement is then entered in Sage. Security-wise, everyone's heard about bank accounts being hacked and things like that, and fraudulent payments going out. So it's a good security check. You're working through that bank statement. You're making sure that everything that's on that bank statement should be there. And for cash flow purposes, obviously by reconciling, it gives you an idea of what's left to clear your bank account, or what has and what hasn't. So it gives you an idea of that cash flow position. One of the common questions we always get asked with regard to reconciliation is how often should you do it? Now, these days, with people having access to online banking, it's quite common to do it at the start of every day. Just make sure that your bank is accurate, you know what position you're in. I think historically, you probably would have done that on a monthly basis. When you get your bank statement, you get that paper statement through the post, and you'd sit there. It's a bit of a big process going through those transactions and ticking them off. But it's entirely up to you how often you do that. You might even just leave it to your accountant. Now, there is the bank feeds option, which we touched on just a little bit there. And as I mentioned, Abby's going to take you through that this afternoon. But it's a free, secure service, that one. It enables you, if your bank is supported, to essentially download your transactions into the bank feeds area, and then you can compare those downloaded transactions to what's been entered in Sage. And you'll have opportunities, as you will today, to manually match transactions, enter transactions there and then that haven't yet been entered into Sage. But one of the big benefits of bank feeds as well is the rules option. So as transactions download from your bank, you can set up rules so that if those transactions are recognized, it can essentially enter those transactions for you into your accounts. So automating that task and helping you to save time. If you are interested, and you haven't yet signed up, the link will be included on your follow-up email to get you registered for this afternoon session, but it will be repeated. I think next week it's repeated. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get stuck into some demonstrations just so you can see the reconciliation process. The screen will work through the various options as well. Now, before we do that, I just want to quickly mention a little bit about the statement summary. So when we first access the reconciliation window, the statement summary window is going to pop up, which is the screenshot that we have on the right there. So there's a few things to be aware of on this one. One is the statement reference. That's going to populate automatically. That'll include the bank account number. So you're essentially the nominal code number of that bank, which is 1200, and it'll pick up your the date as well, and it'll have, by default, it would have 01 tagged on the end of it, just indicating it's the first time you've reconciled it on that date. If you were to do a subsequent reconciliation with the same date, it would go to 02, etc. Can be amended though, if you want to do that. The other options you have where you can amend is the ending balance, which is going to be the closing balance from the statement that you're trying to agree to, and also the statement date. So when does that run up to? Now, you do have the option to enter any interest earned or account charges at that point. It's optional whether you do it at that point, because you can just enter them when you get to that point, when you're working through your bank statement, when you come across any interest earned or account charges. A little bit easier if you enter them at the time rather than via the statement summary. But if you like to, you can enter them up front at that point. So let's get stuck into that. I'll share my screen and we'll start having a look and a run through the reconciliation process. Now, there are a few settings to quickly mention before we start working through the reconciliation, and you'll find two of them by going into settings at the top and then bank defaults. So there's two in here relating to your bank reconciliation. One is this fourth option on the left here, create bank reconciliation PDF. We'll try and touch on that a little bit later. When you agree everything and you click that reconcile button, a PDF copy of the transactions, so essentially almost like generating a bank statement within Sage, it will generate that document for you, a list of the transactions that you've reconciled there and then. It will be switched on by default, this one. I would just encourage it, leave it switched on. You can't retrospectively create it. It will only generate it if it's ticked at the point when you click the reconcile option in the reconciliation window. The other one is this one, which isn't switched on by default, the second option, group items in bank rec. What this is designed for is if you've got, let's say you've got two customers which are just different branches of the same company. But when you get paid, you just receive one payment. It might cover invoices for both the two different branches, for instance. Well, on your bank statement, you're only going to receive one amount. So what you can do is, if you're in that position, you can tick that box. And what it means is when you've entered your customer receipt against branch number 1, and then you go in and enter the receipt against branch number 2, what it can do is it can group those transactions together. It's not a massive win, that one. I'll show you why as we go through the reconciliation, but you do have that option should you want it. But I'm just going to leave it switched off. Right, now let's head into bank accounts, and we've got our bank accounts listed. The other setting to be aware of is within the bank record itself. So we're just going to 1210 as an example. If you've got an account that you don't want to reconcile, so maybe something like, say, your petty cash, for instance, or maybe an account which has very little activity on it, so you don't receive a statement for, you might just think, well, actually, I don't need to reconcile that one. So you can switch it off so that you don't have to reconcile it if you don't want to. You can always go back and switch it back on if you then need to start reconciling it. Now I'll just save that change. Now what that will mean is if I do select an account where I've switched off the reconciliation and we go to reconcile, you'll get this message. So if you're wondering why you're getting that message for one of your accounts, that's why. We've switched off the option to saying that we've enabled no bank reconciliation. So it tells me the bank account selected is being marked as not requiring bank reconciliation. So I just OK that. Now I haven't done that for this one at the top. This is the one we're going to be reconciling today. So we'll select that account, we'll click on reconcile, and this statement summary window appears at that point. Now the thing, if you've never done a reconciliation before, is that the various windows, there's loads of various boxes and options, and you'll see loads of transactions. So it can feel a little bit daunting if you've never done it before, but it is almost like a logical process that you just need to follow through, almost like a ticking exercise. So we got the statement reference. So it's got the bank account number there, 1200. It's got today's date in reverse order. So 2025-02-05. And then you've got that 01 tagged on the end. Now, if you want to, if you've got some sort of reference number, if you are working off a printed statement, you might have a statement number on there that you want to pop in there. I'll just accept that default. It then prompts you for your ending balance. So look at your statement. What's the closing balance on that statement? What is it you're trying to agree to? So in my case, I'm going to override that, and it's going to be minus 474. Next one is the statement date. When does your statement run up to? Now this date here has a number of uses. Acts as a bit of a filter. So any transactions that are dated after the date that you've got specified here, they will not appear in the bank reconciliation window. So if you're historically or retrospectively reconciling, it means that your more recent transactions, they're not going to clutter your screen because they're not going to be listed. Now, in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconcile up to the 18th of January of this year. So just pop that in. Either type it in or obviously select it from the calendar icon. There is an option here to reverse a reconciliation. We'll come back to that one a little bit later on. And then, as I say, you've got the options for interest earned and account charges, which I'm going to just leave blank for the time being. And I much prefer when I'm doing a reconciliation and when we're telling people how to reconcile to actually enter any interest earned or account charges when you hit that on the statement itself. So we just OK that. And this is, Phil, this is the daunting bit. When you come into the main reconcile window, this is where you've got loads of options here. You've got all your transactions. So we're just going to break it down, what I term into the foolproof method of reconciling as well. First thing to check when you come in here is this figure at the bottom here. So we got sort of split into two sections essentially. We've got what we term the unmatched transactions in this top section, and we've got the matched transactions at the bottom. And when you first come in, the matched transactions will say last reconcile balance, and in my case, it's £1,000. So when I last reconciled, my closing balance that I agreed to was £1,000. So that closing balance from the previous reconciliation is essentially the opening balance for the current reconciliation. So this figure here, it is made up of all of the transactions that are currently flagged as reconciled. Not many in my instance because we just got a handful of transactions, but all of those transactions that we've previously flagged to say, right, they've now appeared on a bank statement. If you imagine the sum of all of those transactions, that it equals £1,000. Now, if that figure was to change, you would have received a warning as you come into the bank reconciliation. But what it would mean if it had changed is that something has changed to that group of transactions that's flagged as being reconciled. So maybe one of the reconciled transactions has been deleted or moved to a different bank account, or the value changed. Maybe you've flagged some additional transactions as reconciled. So it means they've been added into the group, meaning that the value would change. But that's your starting point, this one here. Make sure that's right. So you're trying to get from essentially from position A, your opening balance, to position B, your closing balance, and you're going via position Z. So we're just trying to get from A to B. So starting point is that last reconcile balance. Needs to be right. If it's not, and you need a little bit of a help getting into the right position, obviously our support team is on hand and they can sort of help you get into that position if required. Sometimes it's the hardest thing the hardest part of reconciling is getting that right, and getting going with the reconciliation. But that's the starting point. Right, now assuming that starting point is right, then we're ready to start reconciling. So let's say we got our bank statement and we agree with that opening balance on the bank statement, and we're just going to work through that. And let's say our first transaction is a payment for some rent. We can see it on the statement, it's for £780. All we're looking for is have we entered that transaction in Sage? If we have, just a case of selecting it. So we're going to say it's that one. And then when we select it, it'll give us a total of the selected transactions here, so just the one in this instance. And then all we do is we click match. And it moves it from that top box to the bottom box. So we got it here now. Now, the foolproof method I always recommend is that when you match a transaction, check that running balance. Does it agree with the running balance on your bank statement? If it does, that's fine. Move on to the next one. If it doesn't, you've just done something wrong. So you've selected the wrong transaction, or maybe you've just thought, well, yeah, it's rent, I'll select that one, I'll match it, I'll move it down to the bottom, and actually maybe it's a different value. Maybe it's being entered as a receipt rather than a payment. So something along those lines, but something, you've just found a mistake at that point if your running balance is different. If it's right, we move on to the next one. Now, let's say it's a sales receipt from one of our customers. We can see that it's for £500. Is it on our list here? Now, if you're not sure, and you might have it in a couple of transactions, which maybe they're the same value. So what you can do is you can display additional columns in the top box and the bottom box for that matter. Just like normal, you right click on your column headings. You can display the transaction types, but also the account reference. So the sales receipt I can see on the bank statement, I know it's for an account MC001. So yes, actually it's the right one. So we'll select that one and we match it. It moves it from the top to the bottom box. We check that running balance. Is it right? Does it agree with the statement? Yes, let's move on. So it's just a case of really repeating that. So once that running balance is agreed, move on to the next one. Can you find it? Right, we'll see it's this one. Highlight it, match it, moves it down to the bottom. Check that running balance. Does it agree? Yes. Right, let's move on to the next one. Now, there may be occasions where you've got a number of transactions. So you can see on here, we've got 4 transactions, which all say counter sales. Maybe you've entered those separately in Sage, but maybe as far as your bank is concerned, you've just got one bank transaction representing maybe those 4 values. So you've paid them in one go. Now you can select multiple transactions. Now, depending on your selection style in Sage, so when we talk about the selection style, it's to do with the way that you highlight transactions. You might find when you're trying to highlight multiple transactions, just by clicking, it moves the highlight round. Now, if you're like that, all you need to do, just hold down your control key, and then you can select the other ones as well. So we're going to say these 4 transactions. We can see they add up to 696. Does that agree with the value that's on my bank statement? So we've got receipts of that one value. So if you do, yeah, let's match them. It moves those 4 into that bottom box. And it would just be a case of, again, repeating that all the way through. So you're matching. And again, checking that running balance as you go. Now, one thing you can do in here as well is when you're searching for transactions, and let's face it, you probably got a lot more transactions than what I have in my demo, is you can move the divide between the two boxes if you want. So it's probably a little bit more beneficial to have a bigger box at the top, so you're not scrolling up and down as much. Probably not as apparent in my case because we haven't got many transactions listed. Now you can, as well as highlighting a transaction and then clicking match, what you can do is just literally just double click it. You can see it moves that laptop transaction to the bottom. Check that running balance. Again, we'll just do that for a few more just to get them matched. Now, if you have selected a transaction and it's the wrong one, what you can do is highlight it at the bottom and you can unmatch it, and it moves it from the bottom back to the top. Similarly, if you double click a transaction at the bottom, so this electric one, double click it, again, it moves it to the opposite box. But we want those 2 to go through, so we'll just quickly match them again. And the one that hasn't yet appeared on my bank statement is this check for accountancy fees. I'm assuming that's just going to be a few days clearing. Right. Now, let's say you come to the point in your reconciliation where you're running through and you think, well, actually, I've got a transaction here and that one's not entered in my accounts yet. What do you do about that? Well, for a transaction to be displayed at the top, obviously it must have been entered in Sage in the first place. It's got to be on this specific bank account. Remember the date? So if it's dated after this date that you entered for your end date, it wouldn't be listed. So as long as it's on or prior to this date at the top, that's fine. And obviously, if it's been reconciled previously, it will also wouldn't be listed. So there's a little bit of criteria for it to appear. But let's say you're pretty sure that actually we've not entered that transaction yet. Maybe your customer's paid you a deposit, for instance. They've not told you about that, but that's gone into your bank. So what do we do about that sort of situation? Well, we could save our progress and close out and go and enter that. But we don't need to stop on our tracks like that. We can just use the options along the top here to enter any missing transactions. So let's say we're looking at our bank statement, customers paid £100 deposit, haven't informed us yet, but we know who it's from. So we can just click the customer receipt option and basically fill in the detail there and then. So we're going to say it's for, we'll just say it's for this customer. Make sure you put the right date in. If I was just to accept that date, what I'd find it's then not going to be listed because it's after the date that I've got entered as that I'm reconciling up to. So I'm going to date this one the 18th. Reference, I'll just put deposit. And then we'll pop in the value. So 18th of January, it's for this customer. I've just said deposit as the reference, whatever you want to put, it is just text there. There's nothing outstanding on the account. If there was, we could have just obviously paid off the relevant invoices, but we're just going to post that as a payment on account. So we'll save it, get the standard message. There's an unallocated payment of £100. Do you want to post this as a payment on account? Yes, we do. And then that's it done. We close out. Now, nothing listed in the top. However, because we've entered it via these options within the reconciliation window, it's automatically matched it for us. So again, it should be on the bottom of your list. Check that running balance. If it agrees, great. Move on to the next one. Now, the final one I want to cover is just, let's say we've come across some bank charges. So bank charges I mentioned earlier, you could have gone in, when we first come into the reconcile, we could have entered account charges here. But I said it was probably a little bit easier just to follow this method where you're matching, checking the running balance to enter it when you come across that transaction. So bank charges, you would normally just enter those as a bank payment. So we'll enter that manually. So use the bank payment option at the top. Make sure you got the right bank selected. We'll do the 18th again, just so it falls within that statement period. I'll just put charges. Nominal code. Pop in your relevant nominal code for that. I'll just put bank charges in the details. And we'll do £50. Now, bank charges in the UK and just finance charges in general, they're classed as being exempt of VAT. Now, the exempt tax code is T2. Now, it's quite common that some people will use T0 for things like bank charges. Some people use T2, so it's classified right. If you've used T0, that's not the end of the world. It still impacts on the VAT return correctly. However, if you've been using T9, T9 is for a transaction outside of the scope of VAT, then it means it hasn't declared it on your VAT return at all. If you need some advice on what to do about that, get in touch. Probably HMRC is the best person or best people to contact about that. So we put £50 in. We've chosen our exempt tax code, so T2 by default, and then we pop in. We don't pop in the amount because there's no tax on that. So just £50 net and exempt tax code T2, and we'll just save it. Close out, and again that will be entered onto the bottom section there. So essentially it's entered into our accounts and it's automatically matched. Now, just in case anyone's wondering about the change in color here, because you might find it goes black, red throughout when you're reconciling. It's just when you go, essentially your running balance goes overdrawn it will turn to a red font. Again, just to raise your awareness of sort of your cash flow position. So that's all that means. No difference in the transactions themselves. Now, a couple of things to mention just while we're on this screen is if you match some transactions, and you might get in the habit of trying to take shortcuts where you highlight a few transactions at the same time, and you get to the bottom and you think, well, actually it's not in the right order. I want this one as per the bank statement to be prior to the insurance transaction. So we can highlight the transaction, and you've got these arrows to move things around just to change the order. So we can see it moves it up, and I can move it to wherever I want that to be. Now, quickly running through some of the other options before we try and agree everything and flag them everything has been reconciled. So you've got your options along the top, your main options for those transactions that you haven't yet entered into your accounts when you're working through that statement. You can print your list, which is going to basically just print out these transactions. You can send it to Excel. So if I just click send to Excel, just so you can see that. Essentially, it's just a copy of the reconciliation screen. So you've got that one unmatched transaction, and then you've got the matched transactions. Just transfers that information across for you. Just close out. So print list would essentially do the same thing, but it just sends it direct to the printer. So we mentioned this information along the top already, the statement reference, the end date, and the ending balance that was entered on the statement summary. You've got this little icon here as well if you need to get back to that statement summary for whatever reason, but you can change these three options just by clicking in the box and over typing what's there if needed. Options down the side, find. The idea of using the find, particularly useful if you've got hundreds, if not more transactions. You can click it and you might be looking for a certain value, for instance. So you can click into it and type in whatever it is you're searching for. And rather than you endlessly scroll up and down trying to find it, you've got these options to try and find it in your list of transactions at the top. Your swap and your clear. Hopefully you're familiar with those already, but what swap does is it reverses the highlight selection. So you'll find this when you're selecting customers, suppliers, etc. So swap highlights that one. If I click clear, it just removes any selection. You've got that for the bottom boxes as well. So maybe if I do, let's select a few. So I'll just manually select these. If I click swap, you'll see it reverses the highlight selection. Swap again it reverses it. And if I click clear, it removes all highlights. You've got your totals. So as you select transactions, it'll add up basically whatever you've got selected. So I do that for the bottom box. Again, just hold down that control button to select multiple transactions. You can see those 4 added up, they give me 696. Now, when you're finished, you think, right, well, I've worked through that statement. I think everything agrees. You've got some nice check options at the bottom here. So you can total payments, total receipts. If you're working from a paper statement, you've probably got that type of information, total money in, money out. Nice and easy to select. Your matched balance is just the running balance here. So as you match transactions, let's unmatch this one, and you'll see this figure changes. So essentially this is equivalent of your running balance. So we'll just reselect that bank charges, match it, you'll see it updates it. Your statement balance at the bottom is just your end balance. So if I change that at the top, let's just type 500 in there, tab out, you'll see it changes at the bottom. And you get the basic sort of basic calculation. Match balance, less your statement, is there a difference? You're expecting the difference to be 0 because you're trying to get the matched balance that you've been highlighting. You want that to agree to the statement balance. I'll just set that back to what it was. So you should be left with a difference of 0. Now, if you're not left with a balance of 0, then you've done something wrong. So if your opening balance, this last reconciled balance, agreed with the opening balance in your statement, and you've gone through and selected the right transactions, they're for the right amount, then the statement, but your match balance should agree with that statement balance. If it doesn't, then obviously you've got a difference, and it means you've done something wrong. Right, now you do have an option to save progress. Not everyone will have a shorter reconciliation as what I've got there, and I've just completed. So if you're not in a position to complete that, you can click Save Progress. You get a message. So we just OK that. And what it means is if you get interrupted or you don't have enough time to complete that task, you can just do that. You can save your progress. And when you're ready to pick up where you left off, back into Reconcile, at this point, make sure you click Use Saved. If you click Discard Saved, you're back to where we were at the beginning of the session. So Use Saved, it reloads to the reconciliation window. Everything's still in the right position. And then once you've completed it, you're going to click Reconcile at the bottom. So a progress bar, just while it flags the transactions, and that's it done. That's me back to the bank accounts window, and that's my reconciliation complete. Right, now what's happened in the background there? So when we got that progress bar, a number of things happen. So first of all, we quickly pop into the current account, and you can see these two fields are updated. So last reconcile date, so when did we last reconcile up to? 18th of the 1st, 2025 in this case. And what was the balance at the time? Minus 474, that's what we agreed to. So it updates that. On the memo tab, you will have a statements folder. Now you won't have that memo tab, but you won't have this option here. If you're on the essentials level, you'll need to access that in a slightly different way. But what it does, it creates that PDF copy. So if I just double click this one, yeah, that's the one I'm after. This is the report that gets generated. So essentially it's just almost like a Sage generated copy of your bank statement. This is what you agreed to. So it's got that opening balance there, it's got the transactions in the order that you matched them, it's got the closing balance and your totals, it's got your statement reference, your statement date that you're reconciling up to, and also what date you've completed that on as well. So that's on there. So just to confirm how you got to that, it's just in the bank record. You go into the memo tab, and initially you're going to have that statements folder, and it'll list any that you've got there. Now, if you are on the essentials level, if you needed to access that, if we just go back into the reconcile window, and if we go into view history, it will take me into the equivalent folder where they're listed there as well. So it's another way to access that. Let's close out of that. The other thing it does do is the transactions that were moved into that bottom box. If we pop into transactions, and we'll just try and find some of them that we have reconciled. So let's just pick on this bank charges at the bottom. So we got that BP transaction. So when we reconcile, any transactions that were moved to that bottom box, it will have an R in the bank column, indicating it's reconciled. Remember the accountancy fees that we didn't reconcile? That's still got an N, indicating it's not reconciled. The other thing it does is it records the bank rec date. So when were you reconciling up to, that statement end date? It records that against the transaction. You've got a little bit of traceability then as well. So any transactions in that bottom box, when you click reconcile, that's what it's going to do to them. It'll change that R, the N to an R, and also record the date that you've been reconciling up to. But that's the reconciliation process in a nutshell. Now, if you have made an absolute dog's dinner of your reconciliation, you think, oh yeah, I just want to start again. I just want to undo it. You just can't fathom out what the problems are. You do have the option to go into your bank account, and on the reconciliations tab, you'll have the reconciliations listed. So in this case, it's this one at the top, and you have an option to reverse the reconciliation if required. So all those transactions that I'd flagged as reconciled, that would be undone. Not sure how many people are going to use that one, but I've certainly come across it in the past where people have larger reconciliations and think, oh, I've just made a right mess. I'd just rather start again from scratch. Right, so that's the reconciliation process in a nutshell, and we're just about on time still today. One thing I do want to touch on though before we sort of end the session today is just to tell you a little bit about bank feeds. Now, I have alluded to this. Abby's going to be running a session this afternoon for bank feeds. She'll guide you through, explain what they are and how they work. But just to give you a flavour and a taster for this afternoon session is if you've got a bank which is compatible, potentially you can set up what you term that you can use the bank feed. So that will enable you to download transactions direct from your bank and pull that into what is very similar to the reconciliation screen. So you'll have a list of the downloaded transactions from your bank, and you'll have a list of your Sage transactions. And the idea is that there's some enhancements in that process, but you're going to match those downloaded transactions to your Sage transactions. And what it will do is it will essentially feed that selection, the match transactions, it will feed that into the reconciliation process. So you're not sitting there working through a bank statement saying, right, that's that one, tick, that's that one, tick. It's going to download that and essentially make it easier for you to do that. So it can streamline that reconciliation process. So if you are interested, when you get your follow-up email, it will include the link. So for this afternoon session at 2, get yourself registered for that one and hopefully we'll see you on that one. Right, now, if you've got any questions, please take the opportunity to quickly pop them in there. If you weren't quite with us at the start of the session, you need to click the little speech bubble icon on your taskbar, and then you can type into that box at the bottom. If anyone wants a copy of the handout, do take an opportunity to get that, although a link will be included on your follow-up email. That follow-up email will be with you in round about an hour's time. Just to remind you, if you want to qualify for the digital badge for Banking Excellence for the series of webinars we're running, you would need to attend. You must attend the sessions. Watching a recording doesn't count, but if you attend any 6 of the 8 topics, you could attend all 8 if you want. No problems with that one. But if you must attend 6 out of the 8 plus one of the quiz sessions, then you will qualify for that digital badge. Right, let me take an opportunity to thank you for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it. You found it useful. As I say, some of you will be very experienced in the bank with reconciling your bank. You may even be using bank feeds as well. So hopefully you might just have got a pat on the back today, or a bit of reassurance that what you're doing and your understanding is right. Never know, you might have picked up some tips. Or you may have been doing it completely wrong, and you're now going to start doing it correctly. For others, if you've never touched it before, hopefully you're feeling a lot more confident. It's not as daunting as you think it's going to be. A little bit difficult if you've never done it before, getting into the right position to get you started. If you're in that position, remember our support team is on hand. But good luck with your reconciling. Now, there will be a survey pop up as you leave today's session. It'll take you about a minute to complete that. If you've got any thoughts, ideas, any feedback in general that you want to provide, if you can take that minute just to complete that, it'd be greatly appreciated. So let us know what you think. And your follow-up email with the links on that you need to register for the other sessions or watch recordings, that will be with you in around about an hour's time. Now, I can see you've kept everyone quite busy this afternoon in the background with the questions. I think we're just about up to date with those, so we've got nothing outstanding. So with that, I think we'll end the webinar just at that point. We're just about bang on time there as well. So many thanks for coming along. Do take that opportunity to complete the survey. If you've got any issues, do check out the information in our help centre. Remember, our support team is on hand there as well. No need to struggle with anything. We're here to help. And hopefully we'll see you on some other webinars soon. Many thanks.